The gift of the most powerful king on earth to an illustrious Valencian doctor. When just over a year had passed since Philip II's coronation as King of Spain, following the abdication of his father Carlos V, war was declared with France. The Spanish troops besieged the French stronghold of San Quintin, winning a decisive battle on the 10th of July 1557, the day when the church prays to San Lorenzo. As a result of this circumstance, King Philip resolved to build a monastery in memory of that glorious victory and dedicate it to the saint. The monarch's intention was not only to raise a monument to the Spanish triumph, but also to build a royal residence and pantheon next to the monastery. The king, who had a keen sense of artistic values, conceived an architectural masterpiece. His desire was to create a sanctuary for his devout spirit and a place where he could rest from his arduous work as ruler, which would be near Madrid. An appropriate site was found on a southern spur of the Guadarrama Mountains, which was called El Escorial, due to the amount of iron slag found in that area. The original colour paintings of the Codex were kept in the El Escorial library, where they perished in the great fire that broke out in the monastery in 1671. This unfortunate circumstance is the reason for the special interest attached to the plate showing American species in the Valencia University Library Atlas, since they are the only known examples of colour replicas taken directly from the expedition's original drawings. Aranjuez has traditionally been regarded as the first botanical gardens in Spain. It was founded by Philip II in response to Andrés Laguna's recommendation in the dedication to his celebrated Spanish translation and commentary of the works of Dioscorides in 1555. Even before this, Philip had shown his interest in gardens. In 1550, as regent, he gave detailed instructions for trees to be planted on a grand scale on the royal estate of Aranjuez, and throughout the decade he made further provisions for various other royal estates. The latter were intended simply to embellish, and only the Isle of Aranjuez, as it was called, seems also to have been a genuine botanical gardens. One of the main scientific ventures undertaken by the Crown during the reign of Philip II was the expedition to the New World for the purpose of studying the flora and fauna. The monarch nominated Francisco Hernández, a doctor and naturalist from Toledo, and one of the great scientists of his time, to take charge of it. In 1570, the king gave him the official title of Doctor in charge of our Indies, islands and terra firma of the ocean, with orders concerning the history of natural things, which you shall look into in those parts. By March 1574, he had covered practically the entire territory known at that time in New Spain, making a series of great circuits which took in whole regions. Philip II asked the Neapolitan Nardo Antonio Recchi to make a resume of the work. When the Neapolitan completed this task, the original was returned to the king and deposited in the El Escorial Library, where it seems to have perished in the Great Fire of 1671. Valencia University's Faculty of Medicine, which was founded in 1502, was the most important of its kind in the 16th century Spanish kingdoms. During the 16th century, the most outstanding holder of the chair of herbs, as it was called, was Juan Plaza. His nomination coincided with the foundation of the Botanical Gardens, the first university botanical gardens in Spain. Jaime Honorato Pomar was Plaza's successor in the chair of herbs. Pomar's prestige was such that in the last 2 decades of the century, he was designated to perform official functions of considerable importance. According to records of the time, Valencia was one of the principal sources for the trees and other plants which Philip II ordered to be taken to Aranjuez and other royal gardens. The Pictorial Codex is a gilt parchment-bound volume. On the flyleaf there is an ex libris book plate of the volume which Salvador Perelló, Marquis of Dos Aguas, donated to Valencia University Library in 1830, where it has remained to this day. On the end paper there is a note in 16th century handwriting which says, "Our King Philip II gave this book to his doctor Honorato Pomar from Valencia, who holds the chair of herbs at the University of Valencia. His son, Master Pomar, inherited it from him, and on his death it was sold to me by the said Dr. Pomar's mother for £50, the sketches of the same having been valued at £100. It consists of 218 pages of watercolour sketches, 60 of which are sketches of animals, the rest being of plants. The plants and animals represented in the sketches of the Codex are from both the Old World and America, but not in equal proportion. Among the animals of the Old World there is a common swan, a species which we know was brought in large numbers from Flanders to Aranjuez, and the birds that are common around the Albufera Lake in Valencia, such as those which the Codex calls foja and camilongua, the long-legged bird, but there are also other more exotic ones, such as the Senegal genet, the guinea hen, and the rhinoceros. Something similar occurs with the plants from the Old World. The Codex also includes sketches of 6 animals and 19 plants from America, as well as the celebrated bird of paradise, which, though of Indonesian origin, figured among the species studied by the Hernández expedition. The Pomar Atlas contains the only surviving direct replicas of the American plants and animals from the first scientific expedition to the New World. Some of these sketches are exact replicas of the corresponding plates in Nardo Antonio Recchi's Roman edition. This occurs, for example, in the case of the bird of paradise, the armadillo, tobacco, and the cashew nuts. The scholar and professor Don Pedro Laín Entralgo says, "It is very satisfying personally and a great honor for me to contribute to the best of my ability, which is not very great, towards the presentation to the public at large of the Pomar Botanical Codex, the existence of which was known to only a very few up until now. First of all, one must congratulate the publishing company, Vicente García Editores, for this great venture, and for having made available the necessary economic and technical resources for one of the small treasures contained in Spanish libraries and archives to be made known, as I said before, to the public at large. Moreover, they made the wisest of moves when entrusting this task to the person who was without doubt the most qualified to carry it through to a brilliant conclusion, José María López Pinheiro, the highest authority on anything connected with the history of science and medicine in Spain. He it was who practically discovered the Codex, and who, by bringing his many talents to bear on the task, his intellectual rigor, his capacity for minute detail in historical research, has presented the Codex from every possible angle. So, although my only merits are my age, and as a friend of mine says of himself, the fact of being a professor fattened up in education, and though I have not cultivated this particular area, I should like to say that Vicente García Editores' initiative and López Piñero's work in publishing this practically unknown codex, as it deserves, are worthy of my wholehearted identification. As a contribution to the commemorative events of the 5th centenary of the discovery of America, Vicente García Editores is publishing a facsimile edition of a work which is of great historical and scientific interest in keeping with this momentous occasion. The Atlas of Natural History, which has been preserved in Valencia University Library, is a beautiful pictorial manuscript, the only one of its kind in the world. It is a prime example of a cultural encounter. The distinguished Professor José María López Piñero, Director of the Valencia Institute for Documentary Studies on Science, says, "The 16th century Atlas of Natural History preserved in Valencia University Library was a gift from Philip II to the Chair of Botanical Medicine at the University of Valencia, Jaime Honorato Pomar. This royal gift included a kind of anthology of the plants and animals brought together through different natural history projects, instigated by the Crown and encouraged by Philip II's deeply personal interest, and in particular a selection of animals and plants which had been observed and studied during Francisco Hernández's famous scientific expedition to New Spain, today's Mexico, between 1571 and 1577. The original prints of the expedition, which are of great importance to the history of American biology and zoology, were burnt, as is well known, in a fire which broke out in El Escorial at the end of the 17th century. Thus, the plants and animals which appear in the Atlas of Natural History belonging to Valencia University are the only ones of the famous expedition that have survived. However, in the atlas, together with the American plants and animals, there are also many animals and some of the plants which the king had collected together in the Aranjuez Botanical Gardens and Zoo, and even some plants from the mother country, the Iberian Peninsula, amongst which were species common in Valencia, such as the birds of the Albufera Lake. We ought to ask ourselves the question why Philip II should make such a special gift to a professor of a university in his kingdoms. Jaime Honorato Pomar happened to be Juan Plaza's successor, the latter being the founder of the Faculty of Medicine's botanical tradition at Valencia University and creator, among other things, of the first university botanical gardens in the Iberian Peninsula. The work of reproducing the Atlas of Natural History has taken over 2 years of constant toil. The process began with a minute technical analysis of the manuscript's characteristics, after which a special paper and watermarks were made. The latter were hand-sewn by a specialist in a copper drum where the pulp would later be added, the same methods being used as in former times. After the paper had been made, each sheet was individually tested to ensure that maximum quality had been achieved. At the same time, expert photographers had been taking shots of the manuscript's leaves using cold lighting. These shots were developed with maximum chromatic perfection. Scanners were used to separate the colours of the transparencies to obtain the photoliths required for a precise, faithful reproduction. The photoliths were subjected to chemical tests to check the results obtained. Of tests were carried out, and the photoliths had to be touched up by specialist hands to achieve a true likeness between the reproduction and the original. These 20th century artists, now medieval copyists, directed their efforts to this end, availing themselves of electronic equipment and computer aids. Reproductions of animals and plants were printed with the same type of paper that would be used for the actual printing, and with the same inks and varnishes which had been selected for machine printing, thus assuring perfect quality in the end product. Delicate colour montage was carried out in a laborious task of matching and registering. Likewise, thorough technical testing of the functioning of the plate was carried out to assure that the results of the colour testing were faithfully reproduced. Were carried out using a densitometer, and the information regarding required densities was passed on to the machine inkers. Printing, the most up-to-date machinery and sophisticated technology in the world was used. Each individual sheet and each individual colour was printed with precise chromatic matching, every stage of the process being monitored by computers and presided over by the experience of our master printers. Bookbinding is a vital part of the process of putting a book together and is an important factor as regards presentation. The printed sheets, carefully interleaved in the manner of the bookbinders of old, were gradually made into books and then treated specially to age them. Original materials, such as parchment, were used for the covers, which were engraved with gilt-fired Greek frets, just like the binding of the original manuscript. Our publishing company feels a great satisfaction at having been able to produce this very special edition of the Atlas of Natural History as a contribution to the world of universal culture. It would not have been possible without the go-ahead given by the University of Valencia, the incalculable historical and scientific contribution of Professor López Pinheiro, and the technical know-how and specialized staff of the Vincent Group. Through their facsimile edition of the Atlas of Claudius Ptolemy, which was a great success, and their facsimile books, Vicente García Editores achieved international recognition, aided by contracts with the best booksellers in the world. Their Majesties Juan Carlos and Queen Sofia, when they received the news of this facsimile edition, said, The facsimile edition of the pictorial manuscript, the Atlas of Natural History, contains drawings and paintings of the first scientific expedition to the New World commissioned by Philip II in the 16th century, and it expresses very accurately the spirit of encounter and mutual communication which characterizes the coming commemoration of the 5th centenary of the discovery of America. The Zarzuela Palace, 22nd of March, 1990.